Today I'm going to be showing you how to animate your game characters and import them into Blender as well as Unreal Engine 5. I wanted to make a tutorial for people who might not have a budget for animation software or MoCap suits. I'm going to be using a software called Cascadeur. Cascadeur has been around for around about 10 years. You might be familiar with it already. Oops, sorry. They have created a tool called the auto posing tool, which means you can quickly create animations as well as poses by just moving a couple of joints of your character. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not that special. Well, one, we're going to do it in a matter of minutes, and two, we're going to do it using completely free software. This isn't a replacement for MoCap suits or animation software at all, but it's a good viable alternative if you don't have the cash to splash. We're going to be starting out with AccuRig and rigging our character's mesh in here. We're then going to export our character's rig to Cascadeur, where we'll start doing a very basic idle animation so you can learn the interface and a bit of the software. I'm then going to show you how to export that animation you've made and apply it to your character in Blender as well as Unreal 5. And then at the end of the tutorial, I'll show you where you can grab free MoCap data and then blend it into your animation. So enough of this and more of this. Let's get on with the show. Ouch, my finger. In this tutorial, I'm going to be using the basic version of Cascadeur. If you head to the link directly down in my description, this will take you to the download page. As you can see, Cascadeur is compatible with Windows, Linux and Mac. So if you don't have a character's mesh to use, do not worry, you can use a sample one from Cascadeur. Or you could jump over to Mixamo and go and choose a character from there and just download the FBX of the mesh of the character. Or go to Sketchfab. There are plenty of free models there as well. Whatever you do, you just need a 3D character. It doesn't matter if it's got a rig or not. We're going to deal with that in a second. Before jumping into Cascadeur, one thing we need to do with our bespoke character is generate a rig. This rig needs to be supported by Cascadeur, and the best program I found for this is AccuRig. It's an auto rigging tool and it's free to download. Install and load up AccuRig. When you're there, click on choose file and select your FBX file. You might have downloaded this from Mixamo or it might be your own bespoke character. Click on open. That will load your character's mesh into AccuRig. Now click on rig body. These circles here are where AccuRig will generate the joints for your bones. The first thing we want to do is check symmetry, so we're only working on one side, and if you click any of the joints, you'll notice here on the right hand side you get a guide showing you exactly where you should be positioning your joint on your mesh. Down on the bottom left hand corner you will find tools to allow you to rotate and move around your character, and then on the top left toolbar here you can switch elevational views as well for your character. If you click on this 3D colored cube, you can switch to wireframe mode, which makes it loads easier to position the joints on places such as elbows and knees. Once you're happy with all the placements of your guides, just come down to the bottom right hand corner and click rig right hand. We've got 5 fingers and we're going to click next, and then we just repeat the same process as we did on the body. Remember to check on the top right hand corner for the guide to show you where to place those joints. If you come up to the preview motion window, you can check the animation on every body part. It's always good to check the fingers as well and make sure they bend correctly. I'm just going to ensure that she's in an A pose or a T pose. Before you export your file, just click on upload to Actical because we're going to be using that later on, and then click on export and export FBX. I'm going to make the target application Maya because Cascadeur, I believe, was originally based around the settings from my imports, and then we just check embed texture and click on export. Now we also want to save another base mesh off as an FBX, but this time change the target application to Blender. I bring this mesh into Blender later down the line, and I will use this as a base mesh to then append any animations to it. Remember to check embed textures here as well. Load up Cascadeur and go to new scene and go up to file, import FBX, and we're going to go model. And I'm just going to import that file that we just exported with the Maya settings. Straight away it should ask you if you want to enter rig mode, and to this we say yes. On the rig mode helper dialog, click on yes, click OK on the next dialog, and then finally click on add rig elements at the bottom of the quick rigging tool dialog, and then on the last dialog click on the generate rig button. If for any reason the quick rigging tool did not automatically start, just go up to this button, rig mode tool, and click yes, and then click quick rigging tool, and then you can follow along from here. Let's start off with navigation. To rotate around your character, hold down Alt and your left mouse button. To pan around your character, hold down Alt again, and then hold down your middle mouse button. To zoom in and out, just use your middle mouse wheel. If you're used to 3D software interfaces, you will take to Cascadeur like a duck takes to water. Over here we have our outliner, so our character and all its bones. Over here we have all the different point controller modes. You can switch between different rig view modes depending which you prefer to work in. And then down here we have our timeline. To split the screen into two different viewports, just press spacebar on the keyboard. Press spacebar once again on the keyboard just to get back to one viewport. The auto pose tool should be activated automatically. If it's not, to activate it, just come over here and click this little auto pose button. Cascadeur will automatically calculate the position of your control points in your rig when you're moving your character around. This is automatically updated and makes posing and animation of characters really quick. You'll notice that the control points that you move turn blue once you've moved them. Essentially, you're pinning that control point. To turn those points back to green, and so they're being controlled by calculations rather than where you pin them, hit this button or hit Shift Z. In this part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a simple idle animation from a couple of keyframes. The first thing I do is switch over to the point controller so I have more control over the overall rig. I then just select the feet control points and hit R on the keyboard. This locks those points into place. I want the feet to remain static in the animation. For the first pose, I just go in and move and rotate those control points. The hotkey for move is W on the keyboard, and to rotate the control points it is E. First keyframe, she's leaning over to the right. I've squatted her down slightly. I'm now going to add a second keyframe on frame 10. Click on this key icon to set a keyframe down, and with the second keyframe selected, what I want to do is have her hand open and close in the animation. So to have more control over the fingers, I'm going to switch to the box controller mode. Each finger joint is represented by a square, so I'm going to double left click the first square, and that will select all the fingers in that hierarchy. I'm going to hold down Shift and continue double left clicking each finger until I've got all 4 fingers, leaving out the thumb. I'm now going to select the tail mode, which is this button here, which will allow us to rotate the bone structure of our fingers. And I'm just using the rotation tool to just bend them round. Remember hotkey E to switch to rotation. Turn the tail mode off once you finish. I now want to copy that pose of the closed hand onto the other side of the body. All you need to do is use the mirror tool by double left clicking the top hierarchy of the arm chain that you want to paste onto, and going to mirror tool, and we're on the X plane, and then mirror on current frame. I'm going to switch back to the point controller mode. Now what I want to do is duplicate the first frame onto frame 20. So to do that, I'm going to click the first frame, hold down Shift and the middle mouse button, and drag that frame to frame 20. So all I want to do now is flip that pose so she's facing the other way. I'm going to use the mirror tool once again to do this. Select all the control points here, not the feet, because I want those to stay static. I'm going to go to mirror tool again, X plane, which is through the middle, and mirror on current frame. So if we just review our 3 key poses, we can see she goes from right to middle to left. We are now going to add interpolation to this animation, which will automatically create animation between our keyframes that we have created. To do this, left click the first frame and drag to the last frame that you want to create the interpolation between. If you click on the expand button next to the interpolation tool, then select the blue Bezier curve interpolation method. You now notice the intervals between our keyframes have turned blue. This shows Cascadeur has added its own animation between those keyframes. If we trim the timeline here, so we get rid of these frames so we can preview this animation, hit play. Okay, so our animation looks terrible because it's too fast. We don't have enough frames in our animation to slow it down. We want to create an ease in and ease out effect, and to do that we need more frames. So if I come down here and extend the viewing area of my timeline, I've got 200 frames here that I can view up to. You can increase or decrease that amount depending on how long your animation is. Remember, in the free version you only get 300 frames. So just going to extend the viewing area for the timeline, click the last frame and hold down the middle mouse button and simply move your keyframe to its new location. In my case it's frame 70. I'll just repeat that step with the middle keyframe and move that out to frame 35. You can now see we've got loads more new frames in the intervals between our keyframes. This will now make our animation a lot slower and a lot smoother. To complete the animation, we just want to repeat these 2 keyframes again in the timeline. So I'm just going to extend the timeline so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take the first frame here and copy it to the last frame. So the last frame of my animation is going to be 145. So I'm going to click on the first frame, hold down Shift and the middle mouse button to copy and move that keyframe to 145. I want to copy the second keyframe as well, so I'm going to hold down Shift and middle mouse button and move that to 110. And now if I select those keyframes and put a bezier over the top of them and trim the timeline down so we can see the entire animation and hit play, you can see this is the animation thus far. The final thing I like to do is go through my animation, playing it and just checking where I can improve. On every other keyframe I'm moving the shoulder and chest up to give a feeling or motion of breathing. Once you're happy with your animation, it's important to create a loop for idle animation. So what we need to do, the first thing, is to ensure that our first and last frame are exactly the same, which in my case they are. If they're not, just Shift and middle mouse button and drag the first frame to the last frame, and that will ensure that they are the same frame. I need to extend the timeline. You just want to move this last keyframe over by 1 frame. Just select the last frame, move it over by 1 frame. The reason being is we don't want to include this frame into our cycle, because if we have 2 frames that are identical, it will create an obvious skip. So we just want to take the frame before it and include that into our cycle. So I'm going to left click, select every single frame but that last frame. That is very important. Okay, so now we're going to click on this pink create cycle button and it will create a pink border around all those selected frames, indicating these frames are now looped. The last keyframe we excluded out of the loop, we don't need to delete it. All we need to do is reduce the keyframe amount to 145. And there you have it, a very basic idle which we can now export into Blender and Unreal Engine. We're now going to export this character's animation to Blender. To do that, we're going to go to File, Export FBX, and Export Scene. I'm just going to name that Export to Blender. I've just loaded up Blender. I'm just going to delete anything in that current scene and go to File, Import, and FBX, and just navigate to that file I just exported out of Cascadeur. So I'm just going to keep all these settings as default, but I'll just open them up so you can see mine. I haven't changed anything in here. And then click Import FBX. So now we've imported the animation, we want to import the mesh that we're going to append the animation onto. We now need to import the file we exported out of Accurig at the beginning with the Blender export settings. I'm just going to switch to material preview mode and I'm just going to select the first armature, which is our animation, and just move her over here. I'm just going to come down and make sure that the timeline is on 1, and with the character with the animation selected, we're going to come down to the timeline and right click on the keyframes, copy, and then select the second armature, which is our mesh, and go to her timeline, right click and paste, and this will copy all the animation frames onto this mesh. You can now delete the character that you imported from Cascadeur. One thing I'm going to show you now is how to turn that animation into an animation track, which means when you're creating idles, run cycles and walk cycles, you can blend them and combine them all into one animation. So come down to this watch icon here and then click on non-linear animation. From here you should see your animation there, and just give it a name. I'm just going to call mine idle_1 so you know what it is, and then click this push down action button. This has now turned those keyframes into an animation layer. This is handy when you have multiple animation tracks in your timeline. You can blend them into one another. If you come over to the strip tab down here, this is where you can control that animation layer. Come down to action clip and you can actually speed up or slow down the animation here, as well as put in repeat. Obviously it's a loop, so you can loop it indefinitely if you really wanted to. I'm now going to show you how to export from Cascadeur to Unreal Engine 5. I'm just going to load up a new blank project. So the first thing we're going to do is come down to the content drawer down here and then click on the contents folder. Then in the contents folder, right click anywhere and create a new folder. You can call that whatever you want. I'm just going to call mine Character. You're then going to go into your folder, and this is just to keep things organized. Now we're going to again right click anywhere in this space and I'm going to click on import to game. I'm going to be importing the characters 3D mesh that was rigged in Accurig earlier. Click open. We've got all the default settings. It doesn't actually have any animation on at all. And I'm not going to change anything here, but I'll just show you my settings just in case yours is different. So I'm going to click on import all, and if we come to our content drawer, we can see all the materials and the mesh have come through. So I'm just going to select the skeleton and drag her into the scene. We just need to rotate her around, go to her transform tools and type in 180 in her Z axis there, so she's facing us. So I'm just going to jump back into Cascadeur and export that idle animation for Unreal Engine. Just go to File, Export FBX, and without meshes. I'm just going to call this idle anim and click save. We're now going to import that idle animation from Cascadeur. So to do that, we're going to click on our content drawer, right click in any empty space, come up into import to, and then click that idle animation FBX and click on open. So we're going to just ensure that on the skeleton that you have it assigned to the Accurig export mesh skeleton, which we do there, so that's good, and that we have our animation length as exported time, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to click on import all. That animation is now living in our content drawer. If we come here, it's there, and we're just going to assign it. So what we need to do is add a level sequence. So if you come up to this clipboard here, I'm going to click on add level sequence. This will allow us to preview our animation on our character. So we're going to select this character here and just simply drag it into this new level sequencer down here. So this is our timeline for our character. We're now going to add that idle animation. So you can see this animation button here. Click on the plus animation button and you can see our idle animation. You can ignore that one. That's actually came in from the original import. I didn't uncheck animation. Doesn't matter. Don't care. And click on idle animation and it's added it to the timeline. Here you can imagine you'll be adding multiple animations onto your character. So I'm going to just move the end of the timeline there and just hit spacebar and have a play. So she should be looping in your animation if you've done everything correctly. So there you go. That's importing to Blender and Unreal. If you do not have time to create your own bespoke animations, I can show you somewhere where you can get some for free. You can either use these animations as they come, or you can actually edit them and make them your own in Cascadeur. If you head over to actorcore.reallusion.com, the link is in the description as usual, we can go to this free section over here. I'm going to just select the catwalk free animation and just click on the download icon here, and then just going to check out and then download into my inventory. If you can't see anything in your inventory, just make sure up here the motion tab is selected rather than the actor. Okay, we can now download this walk cycle. So I'm going to click on download. From here you can select your target character. Earlier in the tutorial when we were in Accurig, I told you to export your character into Acticore, and if you've done that you should go over to this tab over here to uploaded characters or uploaded actors, and then you'll see your character there. Accurig and Acticore are developed by the same company, so seamlessly work together. If we click on next, and from the options we click on target application, I'm going to select Maya again because we're importing this back into Cascadeur to edit if we want to, and then the frame rate is going to just be 60, and click on download, and then once the zip has downloaded into your downloads folder, just extract it, and then you should have a motions folder, and in here you will have your FBX. I'm actually going to be using this loop one here, so I'm going to jump back into Cascadeur. So we're now going to apply that catwalk animation to our Cascadeur character. So we need to make a new scene for that, so go to this house icon, and then from this splash screen press new scene. So you actually see here you've got two tabs, so you can actually switch between projects here, which will be very handy for us in a second. So I'm going to go to File, Import FBX and Import Scene, and then click on that catwalk loop FBX and click open, and you can see import scene has imported. You've got a green tick. So where is it? What you need to do is change view modes, go over to the joint mode, and there it is. Now you just want to select all your joints so they're all yellow, and left click and drag and select all those keyframes and click edit, copy interval. Now we're going to jump back into our other project here. I can't remember how many keyframes there are, but select the amount of keyframes you've got all over. I'm going to just assume it's over 190, and then select all the joints. all the joints and then go to edit and paste interval, and there your animation is. I'm just going to trim that down here so we can have a look at our character animating. We're now going to export this animation into Blender, and we do that pretty much how I showed you earlier in the tutorial. Go to File, Export FBX, Scene, I'm going to call it Walk. So we just hop back into Blender, go to File, Import FBX, and go click on Walk Import. I'm just going to go into that character and select the armature here, it's already selected, and then just type Walk Animate Loop or something like that so I can recognize it. Push that down on the NLA editor, and then I can simply right click on that armature and delete, and then click this character. Create another NLA track by clicking Shift and A. This is where we're going to put that walk loop, and then hover over the timeline, Shift and A. I'm going to type in walk and then loop, and there it is. If I click on the animation track here, we should be able to see the strip editor. So come down, and I'm going to repeat this so she's walking quite a bit in a loop. I'm going to bring it over here, and I want to blend it in with the idle animation we created in this tutorial. So I'm going to hit spacebar on the keyboard. That's our idle animation, and then she goes into a walk. It wasn't a perfect blend, but hopefully you get the gist. That, my friends, was quite a long tutorial. Sorry about that. There is so much more I could have got into. There is the physics settings, there's IK and FK. I would like to do another video diving more into Cascadeur as well. As always, the written tutorial for this can be found on the Prompt Muse website, and please join our newsletter. It's absolutely free. I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and liked and shared this channel. That's all I ask from you. Thank you so much, and GG. That would do it. Goodbye.